Welcome back to our channel, English with Ethan. In this video, we will begin the incredible and inspiring journey of one of the world's most creative minds, Steve Jobs. This story is not just about technology. It's about dreams, failures, courage, and never giving up. It's a story that will inspire you to chase your dreams, no matter how small you start. Let's begin. Steve Jobs was born on February 24, 1955, in San Francisco, California, USA. But right after he was born, his life took a surprising turn. His biological parents were a young couple who felt they could not raise him. So they made a hard decision. They gave him up for adoption. A simple and loving couple, Paul and Clara Jobs, adopted baby Steve. They gave him a home filled with love, care, and honesty. Paul Jobs was a mechanic who worked with his hands. He wasn't rich, but he was a hard-working and honest man. He taught Steve how to fix things, how to work patiently, and how to pay attention to small details. Steve watched his father fix cars and build things in the garage. This is where his love for machines and electronics began. Even as a young boy, Steve was not interested in toys. He wanted to open things, break them, and learn how they worked. In school, Steve was not the best student. In fact, he was often bored and restless. He found the lessons too slow and uninteresting. But he was always thinking deeply. He asked questions that most children didn't ask. He liked to learn in his own way. One day, he shocked his teacher by finishing a year's math book in just a few days. He was gifted, but also stubborn. He didn't like to follow rules. His teacher said he was too smart and too independent. When Steve was in high school, he met a boy who changed his life, Steve Wozniak. Wozniak, or Woz, was also a genius with computers and electronics. Together, they became best friends. They loved building small devices and machines. They didn't just study. They created things, simple gadgets, fun projects, and even clever tricks. One of their early inventions was a blue box, a device that allowed people to make free long-distance phone calls. It was illegal, but it showed something important. They could build something amazing with just an idea and a few tools. This friendship would later grow into something powerful, the beginning of Apple Inc. But before that dream became real, Steve's life took more twists and turns. After finishing school, Steve joined Reed College in Oregon. But the college was very expensive, and his parents had already spent a lot to support him. After only 6 months, Steve decided to drop out. But he didn't give up on learning. Even after leaving, he stayed on campus. He slept on friends' floors, collected empty bottles to buy food, and attended only the classes he loved. One of these was a calligraphy class, learning beautiful handwriting and font design. At the time, it seemed useless. But years later, this small class would help him design the Macintosh computer with beautiful, user-friendly fonts. Steve believed that nothing you learn in life is ever wasted. At this point, Steve Jobs had no job, no degree, no money. But he had something that many people don't: a deep curiosity, passion for learning, and a strong belief in himself. This belief took him to India in 1974. He wanted to explore spiritual life, learn meditation, and understand the meaning of existence. He walked barefoot, lived in small villages, and visited ancient temples. India taught him simplicity, focus, and inner peace. When he returned to America, he looked different, he thought differently, and he was ready for a new journey. He took a job at Atari, a video game company. He was brilliant, but his co-workers found him strange. He didn't care about rules, he didn't dress formally, and he preferred to work at night alone. But the company kept him because his ideas were powerful. And then, everything changed. In 1976, at the age of 21, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak decided to start their own company. They had no big office. They had no investors, no fancy equipment, just a small garage at Steve's parents' home in Los Altos, California. They named their company Apple. Simple, easy to remember, and friendly. With Steve Wozniak building the computer and Steve Jobs designing, presenting, and selling it, Apple was born. That was just the beginning. Part 2. The Rise of Apple. From Garage to Global. In the last part, we saw how Steve Jobs was adopted, how he became curious about electronics, dropped out of college, and finally started a small company named Apple with his friend Steve Wozniak in a garage. Now let's continue the story of how that small garage dream became a global technology empire. It was the year 1976. Steve Jobs was only 21 years old. His friend Steve Wozniak had just built a new kind of personal computer. It was small, simple, and easy to use. Most computers back then were big and very difficult for regular people to use. Wozniak had created something new, the Apple I. Steve Jobs saw the future in this idea. He said, "Let's sell it to people, not just big companies." But they didn't have money to start. So Steve sold his Volkswagen van, and Wozniak sold his calculator to get some money. With just a few $1,000s, they started building Apple computers in Jobs' parents' garage. Their goal was simple: make computers friendly, beautiful, and useful for everyone. Steve was not the engineer, but he was the visionary. He was very good at presentations, marketing, and design. He knew how to make people believe in a dream. Then came Apple II, their second computer, released in 1977. This was a big success. It looked good, worked well, and was the first personal computer with color graphics. Schools, families, and small businesses began buying it. Within just a few years, Apple became a real company. Not just a garage project. They moved to a proper office, hired people, and attracted investors. Steve Jobs became a millionaire before the age of 25. But Steve was not satisfied. He wanted to build something that would change the world. In 1984, Apple launched a new computer, the Macintosh. Steve Jobs worked day and night to make it beautiful and easy to use. The Mac had a mouse, icons, and a graphical screen, things no other computer had at that time. He said, "Computers should be like bicycles for the mind." To launch the Macintosh, Apple made a powerful TV ad during the Super Bowl. It was bold, creative, and unforgettable. Everyone started talking about Apple. The Mac became a symbol of creativity and freedom. Steve Jobs had done it. He took Apple from a garage to one of the biggest tech companies in the world. But success brought problems too. Steve Jobs was very demanding. He wanted everything to be perfect. He shouted at people when he was not happy. Some employees loved his passion. Others found him difficult to work with. Soon, the board of Apple, the people who managed the company, started to worry. They thought Steve was too young, too wild, and not ready to run a big company. In 1985, just 1 year after launching the Macintosh, Steve Jobs was fired from his own company, the company he had started in his garage. Can you imagine that? The company he built, the dream he chased, the team he led. And now, they asked him to leave. It was one of the hardest times of his life. Steve Jobs later said, "Getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have happened to me." He felt free, free to think, free to start again. Instead of giving up, he started again, this time with even more energy and new ideas. He created a new company called Next. It made powerful computers for schools and businesses. Not many people bought them, but the technology was brilliant. He also bought a small animation company from George Lucas. That company was later named Pixar. Yes, Pixar, the studio behind Toy Story, Finding Nemo, Cars, and many more. Steve helped Pixar grow into the world's top animation studio. Steve Jobs was not just a tech genius. He was a dreamer. He could see the future and turn it into reality. And soon, his past, Apple, would come calling again. Part 3. The Comeback, Saving Apple and Changing the World. In the last part, we saw how Steve Jobs was pushed out of Apple, the company he started in his garage. But instead of giving up, he created Next and Pixar. He kept working, kept dreaming. Now let's continue the story of how Steve returned to Apple, saved it from failure, and changed the world forever. It was the mid-1990s. Apple was in deep trouble. Many people had stopped buying Apple computers. The company was losing money every year. The products were confusing, the software was slow, and the designs were boring. Apple was close to dying. The leaders of Apple began looking for new ideas and better technology to save the company. That's when they remembered Steve Jobs and the company he had built. Next. In 1997, Apple made a big decision. It bought Next for $429 million. But the real gift was not just the company. It was bringing Steve Jobs back. At first, Steve returned only as an advisor, but soon, the company needed him to lead again. He became interim CEO, a fancy word meaning temporary boss. But this time, Steve was not just a dreamer. He had learned from his past. He had become wiser, smarter, and more focused. Apple was about to be reborn. Steve made many bold changes. First, he cut down Apple's products. At that time, Apple was making too many devices. Steve stopped most of them and said, "Let's focus on just 4 things: a desktop and a laptop for consumers and professionals." He also changed the look of Apple products. He wanted them to be simple, elegant, and beautiful, not just machines, but art. He brought in designer Jony Ive, who later helped create many of Apple's most iconic products. Then came a moment that changed everything. In 2001, Apple introduced the iPod. At that time, people listened to music on CDs or bulky MP3 players. But the iPod was different. It was small, stylish, and could hold 1,000 songs in your pocket. The slogan was simple: think different. The iPod was a huge hit. It brought Apple back into the spotlight. Millions of people bought it. Apple stores became popular. The company began making profits again. But Steve Jobs was not done yet. He saw something big coming: the power of mobile phones. In 2007, Steve walked onto the stage in his black turtleneck, jeans, and sneakers and said, "Today we are introducing 3 revolutionary products: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communicator. These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device, and we are calling it the iPhone." The crowd went wild. The iPhone was not just a phone. It was a computer, camera, music player, and internet device, all in one. It was simple, smart, and powerful. And it changed the world. Within a few years, the iPhone became one of the best-selling products in history. It changed how we talk, shop, work, and live. Today, billions of people use smartphones. And it all started with the vision of Steve Jobs. In 2010, Steve introduced another game-changing product, the iPad. People were unsure at first, but once again, Steve proved everyone wrong. The iPad became popular in schools, homes, hospitals, and even businesses. Under Steve's leadership, Apple became the most valuable company in the world. From being fired in 1985 to returning in 1997 and then launching the iPod, iPhone, and iPad, Steve Jobs had created a technology revolution. But behind the scenes, a quiet battle was going on. Steve Jobs was fighting a serious illness, pancreatic cancer. Even while he was sick, he continued working, dreaming, and inspiring. He once said, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life." Steve knew his time was short, but he used it to build things that would last forever. He taught the world that technology should not just work. It should be beautiful, human, and life-changing. His story is not just about computers. It's about believing in your vision, never giving up, and thinking differently. Part 4. Final Years, Strong Spirit, and Powerful Lessons. In the last part, we saw how Steve Jobs made one of the greatest comebacks in business history. He saved Apple, created the iPod, iPhone, and iPad, and completely changed how we live and connect. Now let's talk about the final years of his life, his strong spirit, and the powerful life lessons we can learn from him. In 2003, Steve Jobs was diagnosed with a rare type of pancreatic cancer. At first, he tried natural treatments instead of surgery. He believed in healthy food, meditation, and spiritual healing. But after some time, he realized that the cancer was serious. He finally went through surgery in 2004. Even while he was sick, Steve never stopped working. He continued leading Apple, planning new products, and giving presentations with his usual energy. He didn't want people to feel sorry for him. He wanted to keep creating. Steve believed in doing great work. He once said, "I want to put a ding in the universe." That means he wanted to make a big impact, something the world would never forget. In the years after the iPhone, Apple became stronger than ever. Steve continued to work with his team to improve everything: the design, the software, and the experience. He wanted every detail to be perfect. In 2010, Apple launched the iPad. Many people thought it wouldn't succeed, but Steve believed people wanted a new way to read, watch videos, and use apps. He was right. Again, by 2011, Apple had become the world's most valuable company, and Steve Jobs had become one of the most respected leaders in history. But Steve's health was getting worse. He grew thinner and weaker. Still, he came to work, sat in meetings, and helped make decisions. He once said, "I'm not afraid of death. I just want to make sure I live fully before it comes." On August 24, 2011, Steve Jobs resigned as CEO of Apple. He wrote a short message to the Apple board and the world. "I have always said that if there ever came a day when I could no longer meet my duties and expectations as Apple's CEO, I would be the first to let you know. Unfortunately, that day has come." He still stayed as chairman of the board, but he knew his time was limited. Just a few weeks later, on October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs passed away at the age of 56. The world was heartbroken. People around the globe shared memories, quotes, and tributes. In front of Apple stores, people left flowers, candles, and thank you notes. Steve Jobs was not just a businessman. He was a visionary, a dreamer, and a man who never gave up. Even when life was hard, even when people doubted him, even when he was sick. He taught us many lessons. Believe in your dreams, even when others don't. Think different. Don't follow the crowd. Keep learning, stay curious, stay hungry. Create with love. Make things you care about. Live fully, because time is limited. Steve once said in a speech, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. Everything else is secondary." These words continue to inspire millions. Steve Jobs is gone, but his spirit lives on. In every iPhone, in every idea, and in every person who dares to dream big. He showed us that failure is not the end. It is the beginning of something new. His story is a gift for all of us, especially those learning English and looking for motivation, because it teaches us. Success doesn't come from being rich or lucky. It comes from being brave, focused, and never giving up. Part 5. Steve Jobs' personal life, beliefs, and meaning of life. In the last part, we saw how Steve Jobs changed the world through Apple, even while he was fighting a serious illness. Now, in this part, let's explore his personal life, his deep beliefs, and what life truly meant to him. Many people knew Steve Jobs as a tech genius, but not everyone knows about his private side. Steve was a quiet and thoughtful person. He loved spending time with his family, reading books, and walking in nature. Even though he was busy at work, he made time for the people he loved. He was married to Lorene Powell Jobs, a strong and intelligent woman. They met in the early 1990s at Stanford University. Steve gave a speech there, and Lorene was sitting in the audience. He said later, "It was love at first sight." They got married in 1991 and had 3 children together. Steve also had a daughter from a previous relationship. Her name is Lisa. In his younger days, Steve didn't accept Lisa as his child. He was unsure and made some mistakes. But later, he apologized, and he worked hard to build a relationship with her. He once said, "Having children changes everything. It teaches you what love really means." Steve Jobs had a deep spiritual side. When he was young, he went to India for several months to find peace and meaning. He studied Zen Buddhism, a form of meditation and simple living. He didn't follow any one religion, but he believed in a higher purpose. Steve often sat in silence, meditated, and thought deeply. He believed that intuition, that inner voice inside us, was more powerful than logic. He once said, "Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice." Books were a big part of Steve's life. He read deeply, especially spiritual books and biographies. One of his favorite books was Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. He gave this book as a gift at his funeral. This shows how much he valued wisdom, growth, and inner peace. Steve Jobs lived simply. Even though he was a billionaire, he didn't live like one. He wore the same black turtleneck, jeans, and sneakers every day. Why? Because he wanted to focus his mind on important things, not on what to wear. He also believed in design with purpose. At home, he waited for years to buy furniture, because he only wanted something that felt perfect. He once said, "Details matter. It's worth waiting to get it right." Steve loved music too. He admired artists like Bob Dylan and the Beatles. Their songs inspired his creativity and thinking. He believed that technology and art could work together. That's why Apple products weren't just useful, they were beautiful. He taught his team to care about every small detail, from how a button feels to how a phone fits in your hand. Everything had to be just right. But what did life mean to Steve Jobs? In the end, he believed that life is about doing what you love, helping others, and making something that lasts. He once said, "Being the richest man in the cemetery doesn't matter to me. Going to bed at night saying we've done something wonderful, that's what matters." He wanted his work to help people live better lives. He wanted to inspire future dreamers and creators. And he did. Even though Steve Jobs is no longer with us, his words, ideas, and actions still guide us. He showed us how to live with passion. He taught us the power of simple thinking. He reminded us that time is precious and we must use it well. For us English learners and dreamers, Steve's story is full of strength, honesty, and courage. We can learn not just from his success, but from his heart. Part 6. Steve Jobs' Legacy: How He Changed the World Forever. In the last part, we explored Steve Jobs' personal life, beliefs, and how he saw the meaning of life. Now let's move to the final part of his story. His legacy, what he left behind, and how he changed the world forever. Steve Jobs passed away on October 5, 2011, at the age of 56. He had battled a rare kind of cancer for many years. When the world heard the news of his death, people everywhere, in every country, felt a deep loss. Leaders, artists, students, and everyday people came forward to say one thing: Steve Jobs changed my life. But what made his legacy so powerful? Let's look at it step by step. 1. He changed the way we use technology. Before Steve Jobs, computers were big, boring machines only used by professionals. But he believed that everyone should have access to technology. He said, "A computer is the bicycle for the mind." His goal was to make computers simple, beautiful, and fun to use. Because of him, we now have the Mac, a personal computer for everyone; the iPod, music in your pocket; the iPhone, a phone that's also a computer, camera, and more; the iPad, a new way to read, learn, and create; the App Store, a place where developers can share ideas with the world. He didn't just create products. He changed the way we live, talk, learn, work, and dream. 2. He inspired dreamers and creators. Steve Jobs wasn't just a businessman. He was a visionary, someone who sees the future before others do. He believed that great things happen when art and science come together. This belief created a generation of creators who now build apps, games, tools, and content that help millions. Many young people started their own companies after watching him speak or reading his story. He gave them hope. He made them believe that even small people can do big things. 3. He made failure a lesson. Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, the company he started. But he didn't give up. He said, "Sometimes life hits you in the head with a brick. Don't lose faith." This one line has helped millions of people get back up after failure. He taught us, failure is not the end. If you love what you do, you will try again. Every failure is a step towards something greater. 4th, he showed the power of focus. Steve believed in doing less, but doing it better. When he returned to Apple in 1997, the company had over 300 products. He cut them down to just 10. He said, "Focus means saying no." This idea helped many businesses and individuals understand the power of simplicity. We don't need to do everything. We just need to do what matters most and do it with excellence. 5. He left behind wisdom for generations. Even after his death, Steve Jobs' words continue to inspire the world. His 2005 speech at Stanford University is one of the most watched motivational speeches ever. In that speech, he said, "Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life." That one line has become a guide for people in every part of the world. Final words. Steve Jobs didn't just build a company. He built a way of thinking. He taught us to follow our curiosity, trust our gut, learn from every mistake, focus on quality, and most of all, never give up. Today, even though Steve Jobs is not with us, his ideas, spirit, and passion live on. In every iPhone, every smart idea, and every young dreamer who dares to think different, he lives on. So, if you're learning English, dreaming big, or building your future, remember, stay hungry, stay foolish. These were his words, and they still guide millions across the world. Thank you for watching the full story of Steve Jobs. We hope it inspired you, motivated you, and helped you improve your English. If you enjoyed this story and learned something new, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you powerful life stories in simple English to help you learn and stay inspired every day. See you in the next video.